Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining me on another episode in the garden. I'm starting this video off with just some maintenance things that I've been doing around the garden, trimming up the squash and making sure that I don't have any disease or pest on the leaves of my plants. Now with this pepper plant here, I decided to pull it up because it's green, but it's turning a pale green and it's really not thriving. There weren't any fruit buds, nothing was happening, so I decided to get rid of this overwintered pepper that was hurt by the frost that we got. Moving over to the tomatoes, since these have been in since the end of April, it's about time to give them a mid-season freshen up. So I'm pulling back this straw from the base of the tomatoes, just gently doing this. I'm not digging down. I'm just trying to get that top layer of straw. And then in the bucket, I have a mixture of fertilizer and worm castings, and I'm going to sprinkle that along the base of every plant. I'm not really doing it heavy here. I'm just giving it a top dressing to kind of give it some additional nutrients as it goes into the hot weather. And I did the same thing for the peppers. I can zoom in a little bit better with the peppers and show exactly what I'm doing, how I'm not actually like digging down. I'm just scraping that layer of straw and then putting the fertilizer and worm castings in the root zone, but not up against the base of the plants themselves. Then over to the onions. This season, the onions didn't do well at all. The bulbs didn't get as large as they did last year. So instead of just leaving them in the ground, since some of them had fallen over at the stem, I just went and harvested all of the onions to dry them out for storage. I don't think I'm going to do as many onions next year. I think I'm going to focus on putting a lot of garlic in the ground because we really do use garlic, and I was impressed with the fresh garlic. I'm just dumping the dirt from the pepper plant into here because the soil was a good soil. It wasn't dried out. And that bag up at the top right, I'm also going to put that into this bed as well, just to bring up the soil level. This was a new bed that I had started in the early spring, and as with most beds when you start, they do sink down after the first crop. So I'm just putting what extras I have into here to reuse it. Once I've dumped the soil, then I'm just going to go through and make sure there aren't any large clumps of roots or any other debris in there, and then move to this bed. So for this onion bed, I'm only harvesting half of the crop. One type of onion needed a longer time than the other, and even though I am harvesting it early, I wanted to give it just a couple more days, so I'm going to harvest the one side of this bed. What I noticed in this bed was that the red onions did do better than the yellow onions or the shallots. Again, any harvest for me is better than no harvest at all, so I'm definitely not complaining about the size of onions that I have. I'm just proud to have grown my own and have something to show for what I grew in this bed. So I'm going to set these out. My plan was to set these out for a couple of days in the sun, but we got rain, so I had to move them inside sooner than later, but this is the final harvest there. And as with every year, my plans for my garden changed. So I said I was going to let these beds rest, but then I saw something that I wanted to grow. So I'm putting the worm casting and fertilizer mix in this bed. I'm going to mix it in really well and then prep this bed for growing some summer squash and some watermelon. So this particular bed, I'm using the auger that my husband purchased, and I'm just mixing the worm castings and fertilizer in. Me and tools really don't go well together, so I'm getting the dirt more on myself than mixing it in, but it was fun using this, even though it did make my arm tired, but probably not as tired as I would have been if I tried to mix this by hand. But I just went around this bed and mixed everything in, and this bed is going to have the lemon watermelon in here. It's a small compact watermelon that looks like a larger lemon, and from what I've heard, it's very, very sweet. And since it had a short 70-day harvest time, I figured it would be pretty easy to go ahead and put in there. In the bed, once I harvest the rest of the onions, I'm going to put 3 different summer squash that have 45 to 50 days, which will do well here in New Jersey for me to get a harvest before the frost comes in. But that's the plan for these 2 beds. And once I finished putting the teepee together, I'm going to try to trellis it through a teepee. So I just took some wood, the scraps that I have, and built a teepee, wrapped it up, and hopefully this will support it once it grows. And I also did some additional teepees in the other bed after the harvest, and this is what those beds look like once everything is completed. I used metal T-posts in this one instead of the wood. I didn't have as much wood and felt that this would be a better option. And that concludes the garden update. I do hope you've enjoyed the content. Please like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.